I'm playing with you on. This is not going to be a 1 week sermon. I don't know how far we'll get today. I don't know how far we'll get when we're going to finish. So waiting is part of the journey. But we're going to cover one particular story in the Bible as this. Now, my sermon notes for this morning are twice as long as my average sermon. Okay? So, I don't know how long it's going to take to get to wherever we're going to get before we call it good enough for this morning. So, we are going to be walking through this idea that waiting is part of the journey. Because you know what? As Christians, we get annoyed when we're asked to wait, right? You make an appointment to go in, and whether you're trying to get your car in the shop or see the doctor or visit with your banker, you make appointments, right? And if your appointment is for 10:10, you're looking at your watch and saying it's 10:10. Why are we not visiting? If it's why at 10:45, why am I not in seeing the doctor yet? Why am I waiting? So we get impatient because we put a time on we made sure we were here in time. If I knew you were going to be a half hour late, I'd have been a half hour late. I wouldn't have cared. But you made me sit here. So, Acts 27. I threw some pictures from our Bible map book up for this morning. So Paul has been arrested. If you read in Acts, there seems to be this really obnoxious guy named Paul. And he gets this hair inside of him. And even though everybody's screaming at him, don't do it, he does it anyway. He has put it in his heart's mind that he's going to go back to Jerusalem. He's on his third missionary trip. Everybody loves him where he's at. And he's like, I'm homesick. I want to go home. They're going to grab you. They're going to torment you. They're going to... And he's like, yeah, well, whatever. I'm going home. And he gets home, and they grab him and torment him. And it's a lot like the thing with Jesus, except Paul has this trump card. I'm a Roman citizen. You cannot do this to a Roman citizen. So he makes his appeal to Caesar. If I'm going to be punished for who I am, then I'm going to leverage my citizenship as a Roman citizen. So he makes his appeal. So again, as a result of that appeal, again, this is after 3 missionary trips to Asia Minor. He's in Jerusalem, and so he's going to go to Rome. So we're at Acts 27. When it was decided that we were to sail to Italy, they handed Paul over and some prisoners to a centurion named Julius, one of the imperial regiment. So we had boarded a ship of Antioch. We put to sail, intending to sail to ports along the coast of Asia, Articus, Macedonia, and Thessalonica was with us. The next day we put in at Sidon, and Julius treated Paul kindly and allowed him to go to his friends to receive care. So that's here. So this is one day, and now they're getting ready to leave here. All right. Now, as you see this little green red arrow, this is the trip that they make. That's not the trip they were scheduled to make. All right. Now, here's another wonderful picture from our map. The trip that we're scheduled to make was this. They were going to go here, 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 up here, and they were going to go here, and they were going to go over here. That was the trip that was scheduled, that we just read, right? Because Thessalonica is up here. This is where Thessalonica is, and that was on the trip that we just read. So they were supposed to go all around, up to here, around Macedonia, but they didn't. They did something else. They did this. That's not the schedule. How many times in life have you set out a plan and quickly discovered that plan wasn't going to work? Anybody? Every day. So apparently there's detours. And a part of the detour here, we read right away. When we had put out to sea from there, we sailed along the northern coast of Cyprus. After sailing through the open sea of Sicilia and Pamphylia, we arrived in Myra in Lasenia. There the centurion found an Alexandrian ship sailing for Italy and put us on board. Sailing slowly for many days, we came with difficulty as far as Cnidus. Now let's back up one to show you that. Okay? So these are the places that we just read. And Myra is over here. Okay? So then from here, they ended up going this way. Okay? So again, they were supposed to go up here and then around. But over here, they decided to change path because things were not going well. All right? So they changed course and they come down this way. What's that? They changed ships. Yep. All right. Dun, dun, dun. Since the wind did not allow us to approach it, we sailed along the south side of Crete, off of Salmon. With yet more difficulty, we sailed along the coast and came to a place called Fairhaven near the city of Lycia. Here's where Fairhaven is. All right? Now, this is a relatively small island, Crete. In the grand scope of things, it's kind of a big island in the Mediterranean, but it's a small island when you talk about islands in general. Now, notice that there's this little itty bitty dot right here. This is the city known as Phoenix. Here's why this is important. So from here, by now much time had passed, and the voyage was already dangerous since the fast was already over. Paul gave his advice and told the men, I can see that our voyage is headed towards damage and heavy loss, not only to the cargo and to the ship, but also to of our lives. But the centurion paid attention to the captain and the owner of the ship rather than what Paul had said. Since the harbor was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that they would set sail there, hoping somehow to reach Phoenix. That little place, just a little bit on that dot. They just wanted to go from here to here. That's all they wanted to do. That's a small place. That's like driving from Wing to Bismarck, right? Maybe even, well, distance-wise, it's probably even shorter in real life. But they're just wanting to sail from here to here. That's it. That doesn't sound like that much, does it? But it is dangerous, apparently. And they wanted to winter there. When a gentle south wind sprang up, they thought they had achieved their purpose. They weighed anchor and sailed along the shore of Crete. But not long afterwards, the fierce wind called the northeasterner, rushed down from the island. Since the ship was caught, it was unable to head into the wind. We gave way to it and were driven along. After running under the shelter of the little island called Claudia, we barely able to get control of the skiff. After hoisting it up, they used ropes and tackle and girded the ship. Then, fearing that they would run aground on Cyprus, they lowered the drift anchor, and in this way they were driven along. Because we were being severely battered by the storm, they began to jettison the cargo the next day. On the third day, they threw the ship's gear overboard with their own hands. Again, they only wanted to go a little ways, and the weather would not cooperate. Too bad we always have weather that cooperates with us in North Dakota. We have a hard time relating to bad weather. Come on, people, that's funny. There'd be little weather without bad weather. There you go, Fred. For many days, neither sun nor stars appeared, and the severe storm kept raging. Finally, all the hope that we would be saved was disappearing. Since many were going without food, Paul stood up among them and said, "You men should have followed my advice." Don't you hate those "I told you so's"? Not to sail from Crete and sustain this damage and loss. Now I urge you, take courage, because there will be no loss of our lives, but only the ship. For this night an angel of God I belong to and serve stood by me and said, "Do not be afraid. Paul, you must stand before Caesar, and look, God has graciously given you and all those who are sailing with you. Therefore take courage, men, because I believe God that it will be just as the way it was told to me. However, we must run aground on a certain island." Questioning God's plan. On the 14th night, we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea when, about midnight, the sailors sensed they were approaching land. They took the surroundings and found that the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later, they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that they would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. In an attempt to escape from the ship, sailors set the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending that they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. Paul said to the centurion, "Soldiers, unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes that held the lifeboat and let it fall away. Now that's putting all your eggs in one basket. The sailors were not thinking too optimistic. We'll fend for ourselves. We'll be better off in the lifeboat. And the Romans, at the advice of Paul, said, "Hey, dude, we need them. We need them. Don't let them get away." And they stopped them. They stopped them from letting them get away. When it was about daylight, Paul urged them to take food, saying, "Today is the 14th day that we've been waiting and going without food. having eaten nothing. Therefore I urge you, take some food, for this has to do with your survival, since none of you will lose a hair from your head. That's a good thing. Some of us can't afford. After he said these things and had taken some bread, he gave thanks to God in the presence of all of them. And when he broke it, he began to eat. They all became encouraged and took food for themselves. In all, there was 276 of us on that ship. Then they had eaten enough. They began to lighten the ship by throwing the grain overboard into the sea. All right. Magic number. How many's on the ship? 276. That sounds like a packed ship, doesn't it? When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but sighted a bay with a beach. They planned to run the ship ashore if they could. After casting off anchors, they left them in the sea, at the same time loosening the ropes that held the rudders. They hoisted the foresail to the wind ahead and headed for the beach. But they struck a sandbar and ran the ship aground. The bow jammed fast, remained immovable, while the stern began to break up by the pounding of the waves. So the ship was falling apart and they could not get off the The soldiers' plan was to kill the prisoners so that no one could swim away and escape. But the centurion kept them from carrying out their plans because he wanted to save Paul. So he ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to follow on some planks and some of the debris from the ship. In this way, everyone safely reached the shore. And those that could not swim could float, apparently. That's chapter 27. Now we're going to jump into chapter 28. Once ashore, we then learned that the island was called Malta. The local people showed us extraordinary kindness, for they lit a fire and took us all in, since it was rainy and cold. Paul gathered a bundle of brushwood and put it on the fire. A viper came out of the heat and fastened itself to his hand. The local people saw the creature hanging from his hand, and they said to one another, "This man is probably a murderer, because though he has escaped the sea, justice does not allow him to live." However, he shook the creature off of the fire, or off into the fire, and suffered no harm. They expected that he would swell up and suddenly drop dead. But after they waited a long time and saw nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their mind and said he was a god. Now, this paragraph of information is weird, because the perspective changes immediately. The perspective is Paul deserved to die. He was bit by a viper. Justice has found its way. This man is worthy of death. This is what the people, he's a prisoner. Of course prisoners are worthy of death. And when he was bit by a viper, they're like, let's just see how long it takes. What? Are you okay? think my chronometer's not working. Not long afterwards, they're like, huh. Nobody walks away from a viper's bite. You sure you're not feeling ill? You sure you don't feel just a little bit under the weather? I mean, you were bit by a viper. But they waited a long time and saw nothing unusual. This man is special. He must be a descendant of the gods or a god himself. They changed their minds. Perspective change. Now, in the area around that place, there was an estate belonging to the leading man of the island, named Publius, who welcomed us and entertained us hospitably for 3 days. Publius's father was in bed suffering from fever and dysentery. Paul went to him and praying and laying on hands on him, he healed him. After this, the rest of those on the island who had diseases also came and were cured. This heaped many honors on us. And when we sailed, they gave us what we needed. Okay, so what we just read was about them being stranded, shipwrecked on Malta. Here's Malta. Here's Sicily. Here's the journey to Rome. Okay? This is way off course. They had never planned to be over here. They never planned to go this route. After 3 months, we had set sail in an Alexandrian ship that had wintered at the island. The twin brothers, as it was figurehead, putting in at Syracuse. We stayed there for 3 days. After there, making a circuit along the coast, we reached Regan. After a day at the south wind sprang up, and the second day we came to Puteoli. There we found believers and were invited to stay with them for 7 days. So that's here. Summation of the story. Even though there was 276 people on the ship in the storm, the real trial is yet to come. So it may be monumental, colossal in your life at the time. It may be a blurb to God. Paul was given a prophecy that you will go to Rome. All of these things that seemed life-threatening, all of these inconveniences were but a blurb. Were just a blurb. Paul had to try to keep unity when many were ready to leave the ship so that everyone could survive. Now I imagine if you were going to be the one in the skiff to the rowboat to get off the boat, you were probably pretty mad when they let it go and they cut that. You were probably thinking, this is not cool. I could have at least saved myself. Sometimes not everything is as you see it or you first see it. The viper made Paul a murderer and a god in just a few minutes apart. Many times we are quick to get to a conclusion that may not be the right conclusion. Think about that for a moment. blessings, some odd, can come out of serving the God even when you don't want to. And then here's a real eye-opener. God's plan may be hard to understand. I don't know that anybody who set off on this journey to Rome so that Paul could see Caesar envisioned these complications, these bad winds, these life-threatening storms, the shipwreck, being off course, being unable to follow the itinerary of your journey. Nobody foresaw that. And the journey takes time. There are no quick fixes. There are no shortcuts. Just keep in mind for a moment, the journey takes time. Everything that we do in life is amazing on how long something can take you. Have you ever thought, oh, I can do such and such, anything isn't going to take long at all? And then you get into it and you're like, wow, where did the time go? Because I certainly did not expect that. Not only did I not expect it, I had a hard time envisioning getting to where I'm at now with this journey. So, life for us is a journey. And there are going to be times where we have to wait. I would have envisioned a trip from Israel to Rome not to have taken long time. But I mean, just from Malta to Rome was over 3 months, is what we just read. I'm sure that's not a 3-month trip from Malta to Rome. And I'm sure that, from start to finish, all the things that we read about that took days here, days there, 14 days here, 14 days, all of those things, they were given to us to tell us the journey is off course. Now, I want to present you an idea. And here's the idea. Why would God allow Paul to have such a horrible traveling affair? Think about that for a moment. Why would God allow Paul to have such a horrible traveling affair? Anybody having a suggestion? He had a church in 276 there. That is a captivating audience. Plus an island. Island with people being healed. Non-poisonous vipers. There's something here that, this is Steve talking, this is not a Bible scholar, this is something where I'm just amazed. I wonder how many of the 276 became believers. I really do wonder that. And there's one person in the 276, not named Paul, that I'm really curious about. Because we have no conversion story for. And anybody want to take a guess who that person is on this ship? Of the 276 not named Paul, does anybody have an idea of one name that's on that ship that's not named Paul? Well, he's mentioned by name, but that's not the person I'm trying to think of. No. Yeah, you have to think outside the box here. Who wrote the book of Acts? Luke wrote the book of Acts. Luke is writing this he's along the journey with him. Luke is on the boat. From the time that Paul and Barnabas separate, we see all the Acts from Acts 1 through Acts 16 from Peter's perspective. From Acts 16 forward, we see it from Paul's perspective. Luke joins Paul after the council. Luke is on this trip. He's the one recording this. And we see language that says we We. And we garnered favor. And we were treated well. We. Imagine being a young believer watching all of this and what that does to you. And we know that Luke wrote 2 books, the Gospel of Luke, probably from Peter's perspective, and the Acts of the Apostles. Half of Acts, 16 and older, 1 through 16 from Peter's perspective, going forward from 16 from Paul's perspective. I wonder what kind of impact it had on him to see these things, to experience this, to sit next to Paul as he's trying to give them advice and not have them accept his advice. And he becomes a lifetime companion of his. These are formidable, formational experiences. Many of us have formational experiences in our life. That moment where something becomes real for us. When we make that decision to live for Jesus, when we make that decision to give up that idol, when we make that decision to step out on faith and do something that does not make sense to everybody around us. I bet you this trip for Luke was a eye-opener. I bet you it just cemented in him how valuable the Word of God was. I bet you he embraced it because he saw firsthand these events unfold. Because it wasn't supposed to be this way. All right, let's stand and close.